everyone, welcome to Monash Connections for Change. Today it's my great pleasure to introduce Penny Burke, the founder and director of Essence Communications. As the director of her own marketing communications firm, Penny works with multinationals, SMEs and all levels of government as an expert marketing research and communications consultant. She is also an alumna of Monash University. Welcome, Penny.
Thanks, Larissa. Thanks for having me.
You recently recorded a podcast in which you talked about resilience in a crisis. Could you talk us through some examples of local small to medium-sized businesses who you feel have demonstrated resilience during this crisis?
Yeah, look, I think there's been some great examples, and I'm sure many of us have heard it in the news or just on the grapevine. Those organisations that have fundamentally changed the business that they do day to day. So there was a vineyard up in the Rockford, I think up Rockford area in Yarra Glen, that has just suddenly started making pastries and selling pastries and bread, still making wine, but the actual process of cellar door has obviously dried up altogether. There's the gin distillers in New South Wales, and I think there's one on the Mornington Peninsula as well, who found that the off-cut or whatever of making gin is ethanol, which is a prime ingredient into hand sanitizers. And so they've gone into production of that, right through to some very large corporations such as the F1 teams, who obviously the F1's not racing, but the ventilation team that know how to actually get ventilation into a race car are now making ventilators for hospitals and nurses and portable equipment machines and so on. So I think there's lots of really great examples where organisations are taking their technical competency and working out who else they can sell that to, or in fact how else they could go to market.
It's definitely a time for thinking creatively. I think the word du jour is pivot. You know, everybody is pivoting their business. And do you think it's the ones who learn how to pivot the best and in the most creative fashion that will do the best out of this crisis?
Oh, absolutely. And look, we all love a good catchphrase, and pivot is certainly the one that's been around for a while. I mean, look, there are organisations that are obviously doing very well at the moment. If you happen to be in a supermarket, if you happen to be, in hand sanitisers or face masks, you don't need to do anything differently to what you're doing apart from ramp up production. And so it's much easier for you. There's no pivoting going on. But I do think pivoting is just another word for thinking a bit harder about where your future marketing, customer, supply chain is going to come from. And I always think about it as a funnel. And so you need to kind of fill that funnel with double the amount of actual customers, because you know that some of them will drop through or go elsewhere. So what is in your pipeline, what's going into that funnel, and where will they come from? And so the pivoting concept is around, is there anybody else that could be in that funnel that I'm not aware of? So could I go to a new market? Or if I sold something new, would I start a whole new funnel and get some new people in that way? So that's really what the concept of pivot is about. And certainly it's about innovation and doing things differently, for sure.
In terms of Essence Communications, how have you been facing down this crisis with your own company?
Yeah, look, we've suffered along with everybody else. We're a research agency primarily, so we do research with into that funnel, if you like, and then we ask people what sort of goods and services they want and how that should be positioned, and then we advise on communications and what's the best way to position and what are the key messages that you would need to provide. So there's a range of our customers who are in a world of pain and are in an introspection time where they're not doing that at the moment. Certainly our research can be conducted online, and we were already doing research online before this started, and obviously we're doing a whole lot more of it now. I feel very confident, and I think this is another key question businesses need to ask themselves, is what is the world going to look like on the other side? And I do feel like our goods and services will be in demand on the other side. So there's a little bit of just hunker down and use now to get all of the admin stuff that we keep promising that we will do under control, and then we'll be well positioned on the other side. But I think it's also a key question that organisations need to ask themselves: will their market just resume on the other side as normal, or do they need to think differently and use this time to prepare for a new consumer dynamic?
I think the whole online thing is a very interesting one. We're conducting this conversation over Zoom, for example. Do you think that the old working in an office paradigm is likely to take a beating?
Absolutely, it is. I think from both, the employees who have had a wonderful time at home. Now, I think everyone's absolutely looking forward to getting out of home, but there's a special joy in being rocking up to your laptop with a nice top, but your tracky bottoms on. And I think there's some people who really cherish that time and think about whether or not the commute is a really good use of their time and whether or not they could be more productive in other ways. And then I also think from a customer point of view, if you hadn't got onto the online revolution, for example, and you would now have been forced to do that, what is the argument about going back to a retail shopping centre? So apart from it being an outing, and that's a very fair reason why, but those people who have learned new habits through this process, there's no guarantee that they'll simply go back to the old. They may very well keep with some of those new habits, and that's the challenge for a range of businesses to think about their customers on the other side.
For anyone at the moment looking nervously into their crystal ball about what the world might look like on the other side of this, what do you think that the key takeouts are? I mean, can we make any conclusions at the moment? Or is it a matter of just appraising yourself the best you can of the situation as it develops?
Look, it's a bit of both. I mean, as a behaviour change specialist, so most of the research and the advice that we give to clients is on the basis of getting people to change their behaviour. So people want, the government may want us to not drink and drive or stop smoking or use less water or whatever the case may be. The very first rule of behaviour change is make it easy. So you need to make it as simple and easy as possible for your customers. And so if they've learned a simpler and easier way in these last couple of months, then they're going to stick with that. So certainly understanding where your business fits on the other side is part of that, of having a look at the actual customer journey map. And are you making it as easy as you possibly can for your customers to find you and to complete a transaction? When you're thinking about the future, it is absolutely worthwhile doing a range of what we call what-if scenario planning. What if we have another round of isolation? How exactly would we trade? What if it went for 6 months? What if it went for 12 months? What would we do? How would we need to do things differently if that was the case? Now, you hope that your very worst what-if scenarios are not going to come to the fore. And I don't know how many people would have done a what-if scenario about coronavirus to start off with. But just the process of going through and placing yourself in the world's worst place and thinking about how would we pivot in order to be better positioned can be really helpful. And you may never need those skills or you may need part thereof, and it actually has served to make you more nimble and more productive and more responsive.
Do you think using the worst kind of what if scenario might help ease the way because it's the worst what if is unlikely to happen?
I think so, because nothing sharpens the mind, and that's what we've seen in some of this. Nothing sharpens the mind like a good crisis. I mean, unfortunately, in Victoria and many other parts of Australia, New South Wales, the bushfires were just that as well. It sharpened people's focus around how do we manage through incredible stress, and those towns and villages that needed to do that. And find a different way to get through an extended bushfire crisis. I think that's really what we're seeing, so pivoting and this sort of thinking becomes much more important when you place your mindset into a crisis state. It's not that much fun, it's not very comfortable, but quite often it does actually make our businesses stronger on the other side.
I read somewhere the other day that someone said this crisis has basically forced us along the road. We're going to be covering 20 years in the space of 6 months in terms of business development and the way that people's mindset. What do you think about that?
Oh, I think that's absolutely true. But I would also say, what about some of the good things that have happened out of that? I mean, I think some of those SME examples, small to medium enterprises, have been absolutely inspired. I think things like climate change being on the agenda and the fact that you can see the Himalayas from India or wherever, and some of those questions, how clean Venice is at the moment, and a range of issues that have come to the fore that have been unexpected joys. I, like many others, joined up our street in a WhatsApp group. So I ran around very early on and put little letters in everybody's post box and said, if you would like to get in touch, text me. And I set up a WhatsApp group, and then we all last Saturday morning got up and did the dawn vigil together but apart. And I've had many people in the street talk about what a greater sense of community they have felt, and they've been living here for 9 years and they've never met their neighbours before. So whilst it's definitely, and I'm not underestimating, it's a massive time of stress, and there will be some people who are doing it very tough, lost their jobs, lost their businesses, and it will be a very grim time. But I think it is also a fact of humanity and our history and our experience that also says through the hardest of times, there is also invariably innovation and good news stories and silver linings. And I think that is going to be the case here as well.
Is there anything else you'd like to specifically share with our alumni community after those great words?
Look, I think the key thing I'd say to alumni, and this is where the benefit of alumni is really, is it is a community, and to reach out and connect. I mean, one of the best things that you've got with the Monash alumni community is that very high level of skill set and expertise. And so as opposed to sort of other groups which obviously fulfill great needs as well in terms of social interaction and other terrific opportunities to interact and network. I think the thing about Monash is that it is a consistently high level of expertise that you can tap into, and a whole range of opportunities to do that. So I think it would be to make sure you reach out and connect, because you invariably will find some benefits for you and your business.
Fantastic. I'll leave it there. Thank you so much, Penny Burke.
Thank you so much, Larissa. Have a great day.
Okay.